Hello, everyone. My name is Mustafa. Today is my case report, and the discussion is about finance. And as you can see, I chose the country of Iran, um, which is basically aligns with my job and why the government sent me here to basically have this master's degree. um, so why Iran is important? Let's just talk about a little bit of discussion about what is where Iran is, what is their background, and what is their history. Basically, about 9 million people country. They're surrounded by Afghanistan, Turkey, Azerbaijan, Iraq, and the Persian Gulf. They hold possibly the most out of all the oil reserve in the Middle East. um, in the top probably 5 countries in the world that have oil reserves. They also have a lot of political influence by exporting their ideology, especially after the Shah was fallen in 1979 and the coming of the Khomeini, the Ayatollah. Um, and why I chose Iran is because um, from a U.S. citizen's perspective, or the entire world, a Western world, anytime you go to the gas pump and you see the prices going up, if anything happens in Iran, that affects you. Any products you buy from China, or and you think the prices are going up, if something happened in Iran and that petrochemical cost to buy the oil in China from Iran and produce what you need in Walmart or other shops goes up, you get affected. So it's basically, I guess what I was trying to say is Iran is in your pocket. Anything that happens to them economically or politically, and sanctions, for example, you're you are economically being affected. And it's definitely an important country to know about and study for their finances. So here's the agenda that I came up with today. I wanted to talk about Iran dependency on oil for finance. I wanted to talk about financial relationship with the central bank and what happened after the sanctions. And I wanted to talk about other industries that Iran tried to not only bypass these sanctions with, but also produce to have some sort of a economic internal ecosystem. And also the inflation rate, and seeing how, from a finance perspective, which is my subject for the week, if you get out of the world central bank, or you get out of the world banking system in transaction, what exactly can happen to your currency, and how could that affect you as a nation? Which is, this one is just one of the best study cases, especially in recent years. And after we heard about the JCPOA and the Iran nuclear deal and all of that. But we will go through that all in the brief. So here's the Iran dependency on oil. The oil was discovered in 1908. And once the oil was discovered, BP, which is a British, the oil company, basically revolutionized the oil extraction in Iran. Within 3 decades, became incredibly rich. Now, after World War II, we had the old Shah, who basically got deposed because he supported Hitler, and then we brought his son into power. Um, and then there was basically a revolution on his son by Prime Minister Mohammad Mossadegh, which the West basically toppled him in a coup in 1953, and then we brought up the control to the son of the Shah, which is the last Shah, who fell in 1979. The Islamic Revolution came in 1979, and the Khomeini was, controlling the country, and which when he brought to the power the Iranian, to the oil to the Iranian people, basically, and established the National Iranian Oil Company, which is the NIOC. The country economic base relies heavily on oil. So the recent stats were in 2023, 2024, despite the sanctions, they were basically making $53 billion, which is about 35 to 50% of the oil revenue, of the entire revenue for the country. And the sanctions basically played a big role in squeezing the oil export volume and dwindling it down, and increase the inflation in their budget, and basically killing their economy. Financial relation with the central bank. Now, we all know that SWIFT system is the digital, basically, means to make any financial transactions between countries. Iran basically was restricted from that in 2012, and then they went back in 2015 after the JCPOA agreement happened to give them some relief. We brought them back to that system, and then they were restricted again when President Trump basically took that off the table in his first term. Now, the central bank of Iran and the rest of the country, regional banks, were basically targeted in the recent sanctions in 2021. In February 2023, what Iran decided to do is basically have their CEPAM, the Iran Financial Telecommunication System, basically their version of SWIFT. After it got cut off from SWIFT, Russia and China and other nations, about 100 banks in those nations, decided to basically connect to that system, and they were selling and trading in their own currency. In 2015, the JCPOA basically relieved some frozen funds and allowed some economic prosperities, but of course it was canceled in 2018, as we stated. And then Iran and China particularly continued to trade outside of SWIFT, so as Russia, and used that as a mean to bypass the SWIFT global financial system. Now, Shitab Mer, which is the interbank payment system between Russia and Iran, was another development, just like the CEPAM, that Iran used to basically directly connect to all the Russian banks and trade with Russia in their own currency. So as you can see from the overall idea is, even when Iran got cut off from SWIFT, other nations came to aid Iran and basically worked against us and against the international community to basically bring Iran economic reasoning back, and also capitalize on the cheap oil prices that Iran was selling, and gas. Other industries. So what does Iran do other than selling oil? Well, they have metal mining operations, and they basically export a lot of steel to these countries. They have a big automotive industry where they not only sell internally to their basic citizens with loans and everything else, but also export it to Middle Eastern countries. Like, for example, if you looked up Iraq right now, Saab Iranian model and Peugeot are like basically littering the country. They also have a lot of agriculture products like pistachio, saffron. They export carpet even to the United States. And also they have a lot of petrochemicals, which is what China is buying from them, and estimated about 10 to 20 billion dollars of revenue annually. Now, when you get cut off, this is kind of the best slide that can actually shows what happened when you come out of the international system. The average inflation, if you looked at Iran, was 17% in the 80s. That's after the Shah fell and Khomeini came in the hostage fiasco that we have with them. Basically, Iran started being punished before even the sanctions came up in 2015. So their inflation rate, and they went to a war with Iraq, so their inflation rate skyrocketed to 17%. And in the 90s, because they wanted to pay back their loans for the weapons they bought in the Iraq-Iranian war, it went up to 20-30%. And now the average rate is about 40% annually after the sanctions, despite all the CEPAM and all the Shitab kind of digital marketing systems, transaction systems that they're trying to basically bypass the SWIFT system with. There's still not a lot of nations trade with them because of the sanction punishments. So now we can clearly connect the Prasad 2014 from the reading, when speaking about the dollar dominance and the economic havoc it can exert on a nation that comes out of the SWIFT and the dollar banking system. And it basically can kill your economy. Um, Parliament, basically, the Iranian parliament, which is the Majlis al-Shura in Farsi, approved a even cutting 4 zeros out of their currency, which is called currency redenomination. And it's basically, for example, if it's kind of what happened to our penny system, and we took it out because they're trying to make the transaction easier flowing inside of Iran and outside of Iran, because the currency basically devalued so much that it became worthless. That also didn't work because their inflation was going 40% annual. Um, and it hasn't helped them increase the value of their GDP either, because the amount of revenue they were making is all going on salaries, going on welfare, and corruption, of course, that wreak havoc because the mullahs basically control the entire country. And now we're looking at since 2012, 2012, the U.S. dollar like went from 17, 18,000 or 11. I'm sorry, 11,000 IRR, which is the Iranian rial, uh, for $1 to today, which is 42,105 rial, which means basically their currency became worthless even more after 13 years. So what's the gist of that? What I wanted to say is, when you produce an ideology that you want to export, like political means or you know religious terrorism across your borders, and you basically have the nuclear ambition in a country as prosperous as Iran was in the 70s in the Shah time, you basically within 40 to 50 years destroy an entire nation economy just because you went out of the SWIFT, you went out of the international community, and you got basically punished economically. And the presentation today shows, just like Iraq, just like Lebanon, just like Libya, and now Iran, if you nations cannot have their economy isolated. Your economic means cannot be isolated. It will always be global, and you always have to trade and finance with other nations in order for you to survive. Thank you for your listening to my brief today, and please comment and reply. Thank you.